Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey SEIF here. Glad you're out there. I always say that, and I mean it when I say it. I'm coming to you from my home study, and I'm sitting here with my big book, the good book, literally, the Bible, of course. This is the brick edition of the Tree of Life version of the Bible. I left my other one in another studio in front of some other cameras, actually. I work in television. Zola Levitt Presents is one of the longest running television programs on Christian television, 40 plus years, changing the name now to Our Jewish Roots. And I worked with Zola when he was alive, and I took it over after he died and left. And they'd asked me to come back, and I was there on the set today doing studio segments. And I always use my Tree of Life Bible, but I left it there. So I pulled this off of the coffee table. It's the same stuff. I like the big print because I'm older, and the bigger print's good for these eyes. In any case, we're in the third chapter, and I'm kind of in an upbeat mood, but it's a downbeat text because there's a warning here in chapter 3 through the end here. I'm picking up, actually I'll start in verse 12. I'm rolling back to a previous talk and then moving into this where he says, "Take care, brothers and sisters," so it's familiar language, brothers and sisters, "that none of you has an evil heart of unbelief that falls away from the living God." People that have a faith-based resolution can experience the deterioration of it, owing to being overrun by sin and circumstance associated with. And he says, "But encourage one another," in verse 13, "day by day, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin." You can put reverend in front of a name, doctor, professor, pastor, bishop, cardinal, whatever. We all are human beings. We're walking around in an earth suit, and it is not impossible for this stuff to get compromised. They call me doctor, and you can see a bunch of books behind me, just some of them. I'm sitting in my study. It doesn't change the essential truth that I have a nature that can go astray, and harnessing that and keeping a good heart and a good head and the shield of faith up is what he beckons here, because sin couldn't be subtle and it can harden. He says in verse 14, there's a conjunction, "For we have become partners in Messiah if we hold our original conviction firm until the end." Now that's a tough statement, and it kind of drives readers into a conversation of whether we can lose our salvation or can't. There are different arguments in evangelicalism. Classical Protestantism was divided over the issue, that some believe that, it's the classical, once you're saved, you're always saved. Some believe that once you receive Christ, you're sealed, signed, delivered, it's all good. Others go, not so fast. One has to abide. And certainly literature like this plays to the, abiding notion. That is to say, just because someone went to a Billy Graham crusade 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. A sinner's prayer is the beginning of a journey. People can, in as much as people can decide to walk on the path, people can opt to swerve from it. And so people debate how to read the texts. There's a warning here, and people can come to ruin if they make the wrong kind of decisions. Minimally, that's certainly a takeaway from this. I don't want to, play to the debates. Well, where do you weigh in on this, Jeffrey? Can you lose your salvation or can't you? Well, if I look at the literature face value, I'm looking at a warning. It's not the only one we've seen. In chapter 2, we've seen it before. We'll see it again. In chapter 2, verse 1, pay close attention that we don't drift away. The implication is if we're not focused, then we can drift away from it. Active learners or workers. It's 30 years a seminary professor. If the students are not working in the homework assignments, they're not learning. Learning isn't just hearing a speech; it's working it out. And the New Testament has its own way of talking about it, working out our own salvation with a sense of reverence. Well, here too, there's a warning about being cavalier. Jews think, by the way, that salvation is given away too easy by Christians. Just say this prayer and you'll be there. That one needn't be bothered by actually having to have a disciplined, righteous life Just say the prayer and you'll be there. It's as simple as that. Jews think, as I'd said, many that Christians give it away too easy. That there is a call to be righteous, to be just, equitable, fair, good, decent, right, a life characterized by right living. I wouldn't say that earns us salvation, but it attests to the fact that something has happened internally to the person. Someone that's living a life bested by vice shuns that, and there's a more pious kind of lifestyle. Something happened internally. And here, this author, certainly, minimally what can be said is that he wants his readers to not be cavalier and casual. There's something significant about Yeshua. Embrace it. Lay hold of that. Don't harden your heart and turn away. Now, interestingly, and we'll see this as the book goes on, turning away is a little different here. That is, when you and I hear about backsliding and turning away and accepting Jesus, no, turning away, it's going back to drugs, partying, different things. Turning away in the context of this whole document called Hebrews is going back to Judaism, interestingly, but don't overreact to that. It's a different kind of Judaism than exists today. It's temple-based Judaism. That is to say, the author of Hebrews lives in a world where one of the wonders of the ancient world, this temple that was built in Jerusalem, is up and running, and Jews come there en masse the world over and offer sacrifices with some sense that they are petitioning and placating the divine. And this author gives voice to the fact that forgiveness of sins is not to be found in that system through an animal, through a sacrifice, through a priest, through a mediator, because there was a new mediator who himself became not only the high priest, but the sacrifice, two in one. That is Yeshua, that is Jesus. This author takes the position, as we'll see, that God has done something new into the world by sending Yeshua into the world to be the high priest and to be the sacrifice. And one must hold to him. To go back under a priestly service and offering sacrifice and the like is unnecessary. It's a departure. There is no longer salvation to be found in that because of the salvation that's pointed to by that, that's manifest and fulfilled in the person of Yeshua. He goes on to say in 15, today when you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Always a problem. And then he goes on to say there were those that heard. They came out with Moses out of Egypt, and they were non-compliant over time. With the net result, we're told in verse 18 that they didn't enter the rest. You know the story. People began the journey with Moses, but then they just deteriorated en route, and instead of dying in the sands of Egypt, they died in the wilderness. They didn't get to the promised land. And this author wants his hearers to stay tuned, to stay with, in order to be able to inherit the benefits of so doing, by virtue of their staying close to the high priest of their confession, that is Yeshua. Well, more to say. I hope as you hear this, your mind is minded to be focused on the salvation that is yours because of Yeshua. How about we do chapter 4 next time we take a look at the book? But I'm signing out. Jeffrey SEIF. God bless.